beautiful ladies. We are talking about how to eat when you are PMSing so that you can rein in your hunger, rein in your cravings, and stay on track towards your goals. And what I'm teaching you today is sort of what I've learned from some of my mentors, and I follow a lot of people who customize their approach specifically to women, but there are a few people that I have studied with or that I follow that they kind of dial it in an extra notch. And they don't even just go so far as to say, hey, as a woman, you need to customize your nutrition this way. They go a step further and they say, hey, as a woman who is going through a menstrual cycle, you need to customize your nutrition for every single phase of your cycle. And so that's sort of where I'm drawing from here. Like Stephanie Estima, Jade Tita, Mindy Pels, Jen Pike. These are all people that have really dialed in, like specifically how to kind of like fine tune our nutrition to really just not coordinate, but align with what is happening to us hormonally. Because our hormones, unlike men who their hormones change every 24 hours, our hormones change every single day over our menstrual cycle. There is not one day that our hormones are alike. And I don't know about you, but I knew nothing about my menstrual cycle even like 5 years ago. I knew that it was about 28, 30 days, and I knew that I had my period, but that was about it. And it wasn't until I started learning more about female hormones to help my clients and to help myself that I realized what a complex beast our menstrual cycle actually is. And I remember one of the first books that I read about menopause is a book by Dr. John Lee called What Your Doctor Doesn't Tell You About Menopause or something like that. And in the beginning of the book, there was this diagram that just showed sort of like what's happening to our hormones through our life. And it's really cool when you see that diagram. It really makes you sort of understand what we are going through as women in perimenopause and postmenopause, because it shows like basically how in your early childhood, your hormones are kind of like flattened out. They don't do a whole lot. And then your teenage years come around and there's these wild fluctuations and they go crazy and teenagers go crazy. And then you enter your fertile years and they kind of like plateau again, or not plateau, but just like balance out. Not so true these days, but that's what they're supposed to do. Perimenopause comes along and they go all wild again. And then within that sort of life cycle of our menstrual cycle, every single month, like I said, there are different phases to our cycle. And with my clients that I'm working with right now, I have a couple of women inside the program that they just noticed that in that last week of their period, of their cycle, it's just a lot harder for them to stay on track. It's a lot harder for them to maintain their consistency because their actions are driven by their hormones, right? Like your hormones, and this is something that every single woman needs to understand, because it's not just your sex hormones, it's all of the hormones in your body. Insulin, leptin, ghrelin, thyroid, cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all of these hormones drive our decisions. Like they literally have an influence on us. So we need to understand what these hormones are doing. And so many of the women, not so many, but certainly some of the women in perimenopause inside my program that are still cycling, were struggling in that final week. And I really wanted to come up with a protocol for them to help them maintain their consistency and feel like they still were in control of their hunger. And that boils down to working with your physiology and not against your physiology, because what we have a tendency to do, especially if we're trying to lose weight, and then we come into that final week of our cycle and suddenly we're more bloated, we start to retain water, our appetite goes up, our cravings go up, and we're literally fighting against our body, especially if we're just like, oh man, like the scale didn't change this week. I hit a plateau. I've got to go harder. And you're literally fighting against your body. So again, I wanted to come up with a protocol, and that's what we're talking about today. And there's kind of like sort of 5 different sort of elements to it. So we're going to be talking about adjusting caloric intake. We're going to talk about adjusting protein. We're going to talk about what to do with your carbs, what to do with your fat, how to boost progesterone and why you should care about progesterone, and then other lifestyle adjustments that you can make to really just make this week as easy as possible so that, again, you can control the hunger. You can control your appetite, you can control your decisions, and you can stay on track and potentially just reset your expectations a little bit. Now, before I dive into the nitty-gritty, before I go into those different steps, I would love to know if you are joining me live or catching the replay. So if you could put that in the comments, just a quick comment, either replay or live, it really helps me to just get this video out to more of the members inside our community. Hi, Chantel. How can I tell you? Okay, I'm gonna get back to you. Okay, I'm gonna come back to that at the end. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I do want to talk about like what is happening during your cycle, because again, if you're anything like me, you may not know as much about your cycle as I did and 4 or 5 years ago until I started, researching and learning about it. And now I think it's a super cool topic. But very quickly, there are 4 phases in your cycle. And your cycle is whatever, as you know, about 28 days long. Let's just say that's the norm. So broken down into 4 weeks, okay, just to simplify. The first 2 weeks of your cycle are the follicular phase, and the second 2 weeks are the luteal phase. In the follicular phase, your body is so there's sort of 2 phases, early follicular and late follicular. And this is important. You need to understand like the sort of like the slight fluctuations that are happening here, because you'll understand how this plays into why you might want to customize your nutrition to your cycle. But in your first week, which is your bleed week, you have very minimal estrogen and very minimal progesterone. And it's actually a time in your cycle where you have more testosterone in relation to what your body is used to with regards to estrogen and progesterone. Some people say this is the closest you will ever feel to being like a man. Some people say this is the closest you're ever going to feel about what it's going to be like to be post-menopause, because your hormonal profile is very, very similar. Now, as you go into that second week, your estrogen levels start to go up, until you hit ovulation on day 14-ish. But your estrogen just kind of goes up. Now, estrogen, just very quickly, estrogen, you can kind of think of estrogen as like the wild child, right? So you have 2 sort of main female sex hormones. So you have estrogen and you have progesterone. So I want you to think of estrogen as like the wild child. Like she's a little bit crazy. She likes to, like, she's adventurous. She's a go-getter. Whereas progesterone, you can kind of think of progesterone as like the nervous Nilly. And she likes to keep estrogen in check. And they really do play off each other that way. So progesterone opposes estrogen. And when estrogen gets out of check and she's a little bit too wild, well, she can create some chaos. So we've got to kind of keep that in mind. So again, first sort of second week of that cycle, estrogen sort of peaks. Progesterone is still really, really low. There's nothing happening with progesterone. So for those first 2 weeks of your cycle, you are estrogen dominant. And this can be a good thing because estrogen makes us more insulin sensitive. And so this is, and this is, again, this is a time of your cycle where, especially in that first week, you're more like a man. And so you can probably go harder on your diet definitely in that first week, and even like leading up to ovulation, you can kind of go harder. You can train harder. You can cut your calories a little bit harder. You can fast a little bit harder. You can probably get away with more carbs. Now, as you move into the second part of your cycle, there's a completely different hormonal profile. And this is what is so interesting about the cycle and that most women don't understand. But as soon as you hit ovulation, estrogen drops, it starts to drop down, and now progesterone starts to climb. And like I said, progesterone is like, she is the nervous Nilly. Progesterone is all about calming and serenity and relaxation. And so in this second half of your cycle, this is when really you should be kind of going like a little bit, like you should be chilling out a little bit. Like you shouldn't be going as hard on your diet. You shouldn't be fasting as long. You shouldn't be like, you know, trying to crush your best in the gym or whatever it may be. Like it's a period of time where we're kind of like, and there is a little bit, so estrogen goes down and comes back up, but progesterone should be higher. Now, that being said, and this is really important for my perimenopausal women because that's what your cycle should do, but at this time in our life, a lot of us stop ovulating consistently or regularly. It's called an anovulatory cycle. And this is something that I mean, women need to know this because it has a massive impact on your hormonal profile. Because what happens is that when the follicle sort of opens up and releases the egg, that follicle turns into something called the corpus luteum. That is where most of the progesterone that you produce comes from. So if you are not ovulating, you will never have the amount of progesterone that your body requires in the second half of your cycle, and you will be estrogen dominant for the entire 4-week period. Because in that luteal phase, those last 2 weeks, you should be progesterone dominant. So again, these are all things that we have to kind of understand because again, your hormones have a massive influence on the decisions you make, on your ability to lose weight, on your metabolism, on everything. So we need to understand those. So moving into sort of like that last phase, which is where we're going to be focusing on. So what happens in that last phase, progesterone peaks on the first day of your last week, which is your late luteal phase. That's when progesterone peaks. And that's when you're supposed to be progesterone dominant, right? It's a progesterone dominant phase. Again, like if you think of it, if you think of what's happening, this is a period in your, right now your body is building your oh my God, what is the word? Uterine lining. Anyways, there's another word for it, but anyways, it's, and your body's kind of nesting, like it's preparing for a body, and we have to kind of keep that into consideration. The other thing that's happening is serotonin is actually dropping. But because you're in this period of building, right? Just think about what your body's doing. Like if you've been pregnant, it's hard work. Like it's hard work making a baby. Well, it's also hard work creating like a nest for your baby. So your baby or your body is using more protein, it's using more carbs, it's using more fats, it's using more energy, more calories, more nutrients, more minerals in order to prepare for a baby. Okay? Even if you don't want one. And then if nothing happens, if there is no egg, then what happens is that the estrogen and progesterone start to drop off, and we start to notice things like mood swings and bloating and back pain and brain fog and breast tenderness and constipation and cramps and depression and increased hunger and increased appetite and insomnia, all the joys of PMS. I don't think I need to tell them to you. What I will point out is that it is very normal to experience some PMS because of this sudden, change in our hormonal profile as our progesterone and estrogen are dropping down. But if you have severe PMS, like if this is a week where it is just a struggle month after month, and you can barely get out of bed and you're cramping and, and then you go into a super heavy bleed, please talk to your doctor about this because it could potentially be a sign of estrogen dominance. And like I said, when estrogen gets, when she gets out of whack, when she kind of goes off the chart and progesterone can't rein her in, this is when there can be some health concerns that develop. So we need to get that tested. And if your doctor kind of pushes you off and says it's totally normal or wants to put you on birth control, you got to fight for your right. Okay? Fight for your body. Don't accept that as an answer. All right. Now, in this phase, I'm going to say this right now because I think this is really important with regards to kind of like setting expectations of what to expect of your body when you are PMSing. But I want to say this is a period of time where it is 100% normal to not see any weight loss if you're trying to lose weight or even gain weight, because you are more bloated, you're retaining more water. It is like, it's, you know, this phase of your period, it's just very natural as a woman to not see weight loss or not see any progress. Don't freak out. Don't think that you have to try harder. Don't think that you have to get on a different diet. It's just part of being a woman. The best advice I can give you is put the scale away for 1 week, right? Don't even step on it. Put the scale away, adjust your expectations, and again, learn how to be in tune with your body and how to respect your body and how to work with your hormones and not trying to fight against them. And we're going to talk about what to do or how to do that next. So the first thing that I would recommend doing when you are in that 4th period of your cycle is don't go so hard when it comes to your diet. In fact, increase your caloric intake, because once again, like your body, like in that sort of that second whole phase of your period, it is in the process of building, right? It has been using up more energy. Your metabolic rate is higher. And so the recommendation is slightly more calories, 10, 15%, like not a huge amount, just like, 250 calories. It could be like a little extra snack, a little bit more protein. Obviously those calories, we want them to come from good sources, but we do want to increase those calories a little bit. If you practice intermittent fasting, this is not the time to be trying a longer fast. This is not the best time to do like an OMAD or to try do a 36-hour fast or to try and do even like a 3 to 5 day water fast. Like those types of longer fasts, those are better during your bleed week, right? Or just after your bleed week, when once again, you're almost more like a man. That's when you can go harder on those fasts. But during that time where progesterone is dominating and you're nesting and you're using up more calories because you're trying to build a house for a baby, it is not the time to go too hard on your fasting. Even if you don't want a baby, it doesn't matter. This is what your body is doing, and you have to respect your body and where it's at in its cycle. The second thing that you want to do is you want to increase your intake of protein, okay? This is a great time to really kind of like, because you can cycle protein, you can have periods where it's higher and periods where it's lower. This is a great time to cycle your protein. You could go up to 40% of your total calories from protein. Protein is you're probably going through protein. There's probably a much bigger protein turnover in your body during this phase where you're building. So that's part of it. Like you just want to give your body the nutrients and the macronutrients that it needs. But the other great thing about protein is that it is probably the most satiating of all macronutrients. So if you know that your hunger and your cravings go out of check during your PMS, load up on protein, 40%. If you get 40% of your calories from protein, trust me, you're gonna find that you are nowhere near as hungry, and you will find that you have more control over your appetite. A great way of doing that, because 40% of your calories is a lot. Super easy way to do that. Obviously, protein with every meal, but during PMS, you could even have 4 meals instead of doing like 3 meals or even 2. 4 meals. Make 2 of them protein shakes and make 2 of them nutrient-dense meals that include protein. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to swap out, or we want to be a little conscientious of our carb intake and our fat intake. And this is sort of specific to women that are following a low-carb approach, which is what I like to do for myself and with my clients. But when it comes to that PMS period, that week prior to your menstruation, what I would recommend is bumping up your carbs and lowering your fat a little bit. So I would bump up your carbs to about 20-25% of your total intake. Now, when I say carbs, I don't mean chocolate and ice cream and donuts. I mean fruit, I mean root vegetables, I mean whole grains, like any kind of slow digesting, high fiber carbohydrates. One of the things that I've come to understand, or that I've learned, is that our bodies actually need both insulin and glucose. So glucose comes from the carbs. Insulin is what is produced after we eat carbs in order to boost our production of progesterone. And again, we want progesterone in this second half of our cycle. This is when we're supposed to be progesterone dominant. And when for a lot of women in perimenopause, we fall into like this cycle of being in estrogen dominance because of anovulatory cycles, because our adrenals are shot and we're too tired and too stressed out, which we can talk about another time. But basically bumping up your carbohydrates to about 20-25%. Okay, and if you are doing like a more ketogenic approach, I'm just going to throw this out here quickly, but if you are doing right now a more ketogenic approach, and the thought of adding in more carbohydrates freaks you out, I do want you to understand the whole concept of fat adaptation and metabolic flexibility. Like if you've been doing it for a while, your body knows how to tolerate carbohydrates. The whole point of keto and the whole point of fat adaptation is to remind your body that it can use fat for fuel. But it doesn't mean that you can never use carbs for fuel. Carbs are not the enemy. The problem wasn't the carbs. The problem was that you were having too many carbs and your body didn't know how to use fat as fuel. So don't be afraid of carbs. They're not the enemy. We just got to get them in the right ratios. And it just so happens that in this 4th week, it kind of benefits us to pump that up a little bit. Okay, the next one that you're going to do is I'm going to kind of skip over to progesterone, how we can boost progesterone. So like I said, in this half of our cycle, we are supposed to be progesterone dominant, but when we are in perimenopause, for a lot of women, we actually have less progesterone. So progesterone levels, generally speaking, they start to decline as soon as you hit 35. So in your 40s, in your 50s, you're gonna have less progesterone. And so we wanna support the body in producing progesterone in the second half of the cycle, especially on sort of like around day 21 and a couple of days before, a couple of days after, because that is when we should have as much progesterone as we can. And there are certain things that we can do to boost it up. Carbohydrates, like I said, being one of them, which is why we can boost up our carbohydrate intake. But there are lots of different minerals and vitamins and minerals that our body needs in order to really produce and metabolize progesterone the way it's supposed to be. Vitamin C, magnesium, B6, calcium, zinc, sort of are the top ones. And so what you can do in order to boost that progesterone, there's a couple of things. So there are certain foods that you can eat. So you could do seed cycling. So seed cycling is where you're taking seeds for the first 2 weeks and different seeds in the second 2 weeks. One is to boost estrogen. The other one is to boost progesterone. I'm talking about progesterone. So we're talking about sesame seeds and we're talking about sunflower seeds, about a tablespoon a day. Grind it up, put it in your smoothie, put it on your salads, put it in your soups, wherever you want to have it. Nuts are really good in this final week of your cycle. Dark chocolate, poultry, any kind of citrus or any kind of food that is high in vitamin C, leafy greens for magnesium. Cruciferous vegetables contain sulforaphane, and sulforaphane is an enzyme that helps our body to detoxify excess estrogen. And again, we want to make sure that we're progesterone dominant in this phase. And then fiber, another great one to just start to detoxify the body of estrogens. So those are just some of the foods that you can just, and I will create a cheat sheet for this. I just haven't had time, but these are foods that you can intentionally put into your meal plan, right? So if you're a meal planner, which I hope you are, then, get this list of kind of progesterone boosting superfoods and just add more of them into your meal plan. as you're preparing for this PMS week. Okay. Now that takes care of nutrition. I want to very quickly touch on lifestyle. And just again, of 2 things that you can do to just support your body and what it is doing in this phase of your cycle, to sort of minimize PMS and minimize sort of like that fight against your body, and minimize hunger and minimize cravings. And the next thing I'm going to tell you to do is back off your exercise. Remember, nervous Nelly progesterone is in charge. She wants you to nest. She wants you to chill out. And she does not want you to be running a marathon. She does not want you to be going to CrossFit. She does not want you to be kicking your butt at spin class. She really just wants you to chill out. So in this week, tone it back. Replace some of the hard intensity workouts with more relaxation. Maybe do like more walks, or maybe do a little bit of yin yoga or some tai chi or some lightweight training, but don't go hard. And remember that the harder you exercise and the more you exercise, the more you're going to drive hunger and cravings. And if you already know that you struggle with that, don't make it worse, make it better. Move into like a move less sort of cycle of your life. It's just 1 week. Remember, you can go hard the moment you start to bleed, because now you know that your sex hormones have leveled off, and you can kind of go at it again. And then the final thing, and I know you don't want me to say this, but manage your stress, because if you think that this is a time in your cycle where your body is trying to produce progesterone because that's what it wants, especially if you're in perimenopause, and especially if you potentially are having anovulatory cycles, your adrenals are doing the bulk of the work. And if you are stressed out, your adrenals will not prioritize the production of progesterone. Your adrenals will prioritize the production of cortisol. And so that is what I have for you today. I have to run because I have a coaching call in 3 minutes with one of my clients. I have to cut it short. Chantel, I'm going to get back to you on your question. But that's sort of the protocol. If you are in my program, if you are one of my ladies inside Perimenopause Body Solutions, and you are struggling with PMS, I want you to book a Get Unstuck call with me. You know how to. Let's hop on and let's talk about how you can specifically implement this inside the program to assist with your PMS. Other than that, to recap, we want to eat more calories, we want to eat more protein, we want to eat more carbs. We're going to drop fat just a little bit, just because we don't want to be eating too many carbs and fat at the same time. We want to focus on things that we can eat and things that we can do to boost progesterone. We want to tone back our exercise. We want to manage our stress. And that is it for today. I hope that was helpful. If that was helpful, please put a heart in the comments to let me know if you'd like to learn more about your menstrual cycle and how it works and what you need to think about. Let me know if you enjoyed this topic. I'm happy to talk about it again. I'm happy to explain exactly what's going on in your cycle if you want to learn about it. This is the last day to sign up for the Little Black Dress Challenge. I know I've been putting up a lot of posts about it. This is the last time I'm going to be telling you about it, because registration ends today. It is $49. There's over 60 women doing the Little Black Dress Project, which is awesome. It is $49 to join. You get meal plans, grocery lists, group coaching, workouts, all kinds of stuff. If you want to join, projectmenopause.ca/LBD. And I wish you a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week when we're talking about testosterone. Bye.